All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of Just a Girl from Cleveland. This is episode 164. Recording again on a Wednesday this week. Different reasoning. I was just getting my hair cut last night, so I didn't end up recording. You probably can't even tell on the YouTube that I got it cut. I have extremely long hair, and it is still very long. I asked for like 5 or 6 inches off, and it still is so long. So I guess that's just... we'll just keep working on it. But yes, that is why we're recording a day later again this week. But recording a couple hours before the Cavs game tonight. So we have that to look forward to. It felt like, the first part of the season, they played I think this is correct, that they played the most amount of games within the period of time for those, first weeks of the season, only having a day off in between here and there. Like it just was, they were playing a lot of basketball. And it's definitely slowed down a little bit here where they've had some 2-3 day breaks between games. That's just made it feel like they're not playing at all. And I'm like, I need more Cavs. This is bringing me a lot of joy. So looking forward to that tonight. They have on Friday their NBA Cup game against the Hawks. So that's going to be really a very crucial game. So definitely hoping for the best for that. But let's get into the topics today. I do want to talk a little bit more Cavs before we get into some Browns talk. So Cavs are 17-1 right now, which is crazy that, the only loss they've had this season is a 3-point loss to the Boston Celtics. They have very much bounced back after that game. And I don't even want to say bounce back because they really fought to the end in that game. Although it wasn't their best shooting game, it was Boston's best shooting game. They still fought hard to the end in that, and have continued to do that in the 2 games since. So they beat the Pelicans 128-100, and then they beat the Raptors 122-108. Raptors are one of those interesting teams where over the years they've had such a rivalry, especially in the LeBron era. I guess it's more of a rivalry on their end, less on the Cavs end, where, they were called LeBronto for years, all of that stuff. So I always kind of look forward to those matchups with them because I feel like there is a lot of history there. And now it's kind of switched in this new era to be kind of the Evan Mobley, Scottie Barnes duel each time. And that's obviously because Scottie Barnes won the Rookie of the Year award over Evan Mobley, which I still think is a great travesty. And I really do think that history will not look kindly upon that selection. So it's always, interesting to play them. And look, Scottie Barnes had a good game against the Cavs, so no hate there. But I will defend our guy Evan I still believe that he should have won that award. You know what I think to look back on that, what happened was that the Cavs were doing so well for the first part of the season up until the All-Star break. Then they dealt with a ton of injuries post All-Star break and really fell from, I think they were probably at the 4 seed to being one of the, play-in teams at that point. And I think that hurt Evan's chances of winning that award. I think if the Cavs would have stayed up there and been like the 4 or 5 seed, that could have been different. Which is unfortunate because that's not his fault that injuries and all of those things happened, but just kind of how it goes sometimes. But I think, Evan has grown progressively every single season, and I feel really good about, what he has built on in Cleveland. Okay, so to talk about, I guess, what the Cavs have been continuing to do well in these last few games, I think the biggest factor in these last 2 games since I last recorded, once again, got to talk about Jerome. He's moving up there in those 6 Man of the Year odds. If you look on the sports books, he is in the mix now, I would say. And I think it's probably taken a little longer to get him some respect because he's on a smaller market team. But I don't know how you can ignore it when the Cavs are 17-1. And if you look into like, hey, why is this happening other than the core main players that are playing well, you're going to point directly to Jerome and what he's done. Last 2 games, he had 29 points against the Pelicans, 26 points against the Raptors. Just really unbelievable performances from him, and it's just continued to get better and better. I like the way that Donovan was talking about him saying like, the way you guys are talking about him was as if he like died last season or something. Like everyone is like, wow, what a resurgence for this guy to come back. And it just has been really great. And I think unexpected for this level of play to be getting from him already here in November. And I cannot stress enough how important that has been for this team. So we will continue to push the Ty Jerome 6 Man of the Year campaign as much as we can, because up to this point, he very much deserves it with what he's doing. I also think just, in these last 2 games, I think they looked physically better against the Raptors after having some time off. There was some sloppiness and some mistakes that maybe come with also having that time off. I think sometimes when you are playing so many games in such a short period of time, you don't have the opportunity to like lose a step or, have some of that sloppiness show up because you're just playing. There is no rest or no break. So I think sometimes having those couple of extra days off, you do get a little bit of that sloppiness. And I do think we saw that in the Raptors game, but they did look more, I guess, energized in terms of the physicality being there. So I felt good about that. I think, they've needed rest. So, very important. And like I said, I just hope they can continue on with everything that they are doing, and make 17-1, 18, 19, 20, just keep going. Why not? Why do you have to lose? There's no rule that says you have to lose more basketball games. And I gotta say, I know this is probably not going to happen, but it would be so funny if they were able to beat the Warriors 2016 regular season record. It's a stretch. It's hard to be able to do that consistently, and I don't want to jinx them by any means and say that that's possible, but it would be really cool if that was something they were able to do. Just so we could like have another thing we could hold over their head. I would like that a lot. So gonna continue to have fun with that. All right, let's get into Browns talk. So coming off of a win, we have positive things to say. So exciting. A classic Thursday night football game against the Steelers. I went to a Thursday night football game, Browns Steelers, at home. I think that was 2 years ago. It was a Jacoby Brissett game. Browns won. And there's just something about beating a division rival when the whole world's watching, rather than like a Sunday 1 p.m. game when you've got a Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night stage. It just feels a little extra special. So I just enjoy it. I enjoy it a little bit more, and I'm happy for the team that they get to experience everyone getting to see them in that light. And I remember that game 2 years ago that felt good, and still feels good this time. Obviously a classic snow game as well. Which has brought up all the conversations again about the building of the dome in Brook Park and all of that stuff. And look, I understand the need in the current day to have a dome in order to host more events, especially in a city that has winters like we do. You need to, have a cover on your place in order to host events year round. So I do understand that, but look, I'm going to be like old school in this way, where there is just something so magical about like a classic AFC North shootout. The snow is pouring down, the way Jameis Winston described it in his post game, where he was like, it felt magical. Like he thought he was in a movie, the way the snow was coming down. And man, we have not had snow at all other than that day so far this year, and it's been really nice in general. Honestly, the last couple months, like we've only gotten cold weather really in the last couple of weeks, and for it to be that specific day, it felt almost like, yeah, it's meant to be in this way. I did make a funny joke though, that I felt like, the way the world views Cleveland, especially people who haven't been to Cleveland, they're like, oh yeah, it looks like that every day in Cleveland, Ohio. You just have a complete blizzard at all times. So I'm like, we really fulfilled everything that all of the skeptics of Cleveland and the Midwest, what they think of it. They're like, yeah, that's why I wouldn't live there. It looks like that every single day. I'm like, okay, well, we don't really get that all the time. It's not that crazy. I mean, you literally couldn't see through the camera on the broadcast. Sometimes it was that bad. So I thought that was it was funny it all worked out for it to be that day. But look, like, I understand, like, is it a better football game when it's those conditions in terms of, like, the level of talent you're going to see out on the field? No, it's much harder for them to do their jobs at a high level when the ball is slippery, when they can't see. Like, of course, all of those things make sense. But does it add something interesting and unique to the game? Yes. It creates different obstacles for them that they wouldn't have if they were in perfect conditions. Some people love perfect conditions and they're like, I'd prefer to see teams play in perfect conditions at all times, and that's fine. That's how you like to, view things. But I just enjoy sometimes the range that you can see when you have an outdoor stadium, that it can go from beautiful weather to a complete blizzard, and you have to see what those teams are able to do in those conditions. That, week in and week out, everything is unpredictable in a season, and there's a reason for that. It keeps everyone on their toes. So I don't know. Obviously, we're not going to stick with the outdoor stadium. They're going the dome, so it's happening either way. But soaking up these last times where we get to see something like that, especially against a division rival. It is crazy that the Browns have 3 wins this season, and 2 of them are against AFC North teams at home, the Ravens and the Steelers. I'm not complaining because it always feels, incredible to beat those 2 teams, but it is just funny that is how it has worked out, that, those are 2 teams that it should be harder for us to be able to beat considering their records and their standing within the rest of the league and how hard it is for other teams to play them. But, it was very meaningful for this team to I think get those 2 wins. Obviously, it was especially meaningful for someone like Nick Chubb, who last year on a primetime game against the Steelers had his horrific injury happen. For the fact for him to be back this year and be able to play well in that game and score 2 touchdowns in that game, I could not have been happier for that man. Like, I was like, as soon as they got close to the end zone, I'm like, you have to give the ball to Nick Chubb. There's no way you're not letting him punch the ball in the end zone. He deserves this. Just the amount of, I think, emotion behind it, and he's not an emotional guy, but even Jameis talked about it in an interview where he said, Nick Chubb looked at him and was like, man, I love you. And just like, I think Nick really cared about doing right by not just himself, but right by the team, right by the city and the fans. And he wanted to be like, I am going to come back and I am going to beat this team that, last year was such a horrific circumstance for him. It was poetic in a lot of ways. And I feel like because Nick is such a man of few words and is so quiet, it does go unspoken more than it should that he has come back from something that a lot of people would not be able to come back from at all. Like, their careers would be done for a lot of people. And he just is such a quiet worker and such a, I don't know, just a team guy that I feel like, even though I know everyone's like loves Nick Chubb and wants to talk about Nick Chubb, I still feel like that part of it doesn't get talked about enough, that like his career could have been over and he fought so hard to get back and be able to play at the level he's playing at again. And I really couldn't be happier for him. Could not happen to a better guy. Other factors in the game, Jameis, he didn't have an incredible game by any means. He was 18 of 27 for 219 yards, which, look, if we're talking Deshaun Watson stat lines for the first half of the season, he was not hitting 200 yards. So if we take 200 plus yards in a Jameis Winston snow game, like, that's fine. I will absolutely live with that. It's decent considering the weather. You're not expecting him to put up 350 yards passing on a blizzard game. So, you can't focus on box scores in a game like that, but, it wasn't like this incredible Jameis game by any means, but did what he needed to do to get the job done. And, you gotta respect that that's what this team needs right now, is just enough to be able to get the job done. It was funny because obviously Jameis has his antics in his, pregame speeches with the team and with the media. And pregame, I was kind of annoyed, honestly. Like, I usually find it entertaining, and I was just like, I'm just like not finding it as funny anymore. It felt like he was in on the bit a little bit too much and knew what he was, saying going into it. And it felt like less authentic in a way. But then post game, him with the Amazon Live crew doing, rolling around in the snow, just the funny commentary that he had with everyone. I was like, oh, okay, this was funny. Like, I enjoyed that a lot more. And then I realized, like, maybe I just enjoy it more when we're winning, and when we're losing, it annoys me. And it isn't as funny when you're doing those kind of antics when you're, not playing well. So I guess that was a moment of self-reflection where it's like a lot of things can be funny and nice when you are winning. And winning cures a lot of things. I think about someone like Nick Sirianni with the Eagles and how much those fans hate him and his antics when they're playing poorly, and when they're playing well, they're like, yeah, that's our guy. Like, we like him in all of his weirdness. And I think every team has either a coach or a player that's kind of like that, where it's a love-hate, and it just depends on what the team is doing at that point in time. And I think Jameis is definitely one of those guys. Big factor in the game, I would say, other than Myles Garrett. We'll talk about Myles Garrett first. Myles Garrett, 3 sacks, completely dominant performance. There was all of the back and forth in the time leading up to that game, with everyone talking about the TJ Watt, Myles Garrett last year Defensive Player of the Year situation, which I think is so ridiculous that TJ had to make that about himself in that moment, that it's still being talked about, when Myles Garrett, to a lot of people, to most players in the league, to most media members, to most people who analyze the game, is the best defensive player in this league, is the best pass rusher in this league. And for him to make it about himself was ridiculous. This was maybe the first time I have heard Myles be so vocal himself about who he feels he is as a player. He was interviewed post-game and was like, I am the best defensive player in this league. Like, if you want to talk about the best pass rushers in this league, that goes through me first. And I was really proud of him, because I feel like he's always kind of been quieter about it and more just been like, I'm going to show it with my work and what I do on the field. But like, sometimes you should defend yourself and be like, no, I am the best at what I do. And I just showed it on that field with the 3 sacks that I had. Such an impressive performance for the rate that he gets doubled and chipped at. I've talked about this a million times on here, compared to the rate that TJ gets doubled at, which is significantly less. He had like 1 pressure in that game, and he was doubled maybe like 3 times, I want to say. And compared to Myles, I think he had 8 pressures and 3 sacks and was constantly getting doubled and chipped. Like, it's just a different level of the way teams are preparing for Myles Garrett, which is a huge part of what makes him so much more dangerous, is the way teams have to think about preparing to play against Myles Garrett compared to how they have to think about preparing to play against TJ Watt. A lot of TJ sacks come on, one-on-one matchups, which is a lot different than where Myles' sacks are often coming from and where his pressures are often coming from. So I was so proud of Myles for defending himself in that moment. He very much deserved to do that. I know last year Kevin Stefanski had a couple moments where he really publicly was defending Myles and making a case for him for a Defensive Player of the Year, and I was happy for that, because I think Myles deserved to get that praise. But this was, like I said, the first time I really heard Myles do that himself, and it was very much earned. Other big factor on the other side of the ball in this game was Jeudy. Another awesome showing, 6 receptions for 85 yards. Made some really nice catches, especially considering the weather and how hard it was probably to catch a ball out there. The team had a couple drops in this game. There was the Njoku drop in the end zone, and I think maybe 1 or 2 others, but for the most part, they did a pretty good job of holding onto the ball, all things considered. And Jeudy was a huge part of that. And, you start to have the conversations, because preseason, obviously, they gave him that massive contract when they made the trade for him. And people were like, he hasn't even played a snap for this team. Why are you giving him this extension? And, when you look at it now, if you compare him to other players in the league, by his average contract per year, he's making Christian Kirk and Tyler Lockett money. If you compare him to the total guaranteed he is making, that's Michael Pittman Jr. money. This isn't top 5-10 receiver in the league money, as I feel like some people really blew it up to be. It's great money, but I think when you put it next to guys like that, he is very much I think shown that he is going to be a player that is worth that type of money. And, given all of that, you think about the level of production we've got from him, considering the quarterback play he has had to deal with this year. Deshaun Watson, for the majority of the season, having to play with him, and he still had some good performances out of that. And then, having to switch to another quarterback and make things work. Like, I think what we have seen from him, given those circumstances, is very impressive. And I feel like if you put him in a better offensive situation consistently, you'll continue to see, more of that and just growth from him in this offense. So I'm feeling really good actually about where they're at with that extension right now. One last thing I did want to say about the defense also that I didn't mention, I feel like the Browns defense really showed up across the board this week after a pretty poor performance last week against the Saints. Defense can be very hot and cold sometimes, and I understand that. But I do feel like specifically in the Kevin Stefanski era, Kevin-led teams have been so well prepared against the AFC North, especially at home. Obviously there have been some outlier games, but in general, this team has pretty consistently been prepared for any of those teams within the division, and that makes me feel really good about the future, and I think a big point in Kevin's column for just what he brings to this team. Okay, so one last, I guess, kind of football topic I want to quickly discuss is that I mentioned last week Hard Knocks is about to start premiering, I think, next week. They've started filming, obviously. I am glad personally that they started filming with I believe the Steelers game instead of before that, because I don't want to see the prior week, but I would be happy to see what they would love to feature from that game and the preparation leading up to that game and everything after that game. I'm sure since those are two AFC North teams, that'll be, a big part of one of these first episodes. So very much looking forward to seeing that. I'm curious to see, I guess, overall what the angle they're going to take with the Browns on Hard Knocks is. Because there's so many directions you can go with it. And I guess what things they're going to talk about and not talk about. Like, one thing that's recently happened with this team is that Vrabel is now on the sidelines when previously he was not. Like, are they going to talk about that decision and what Vrabel is doing now that's different that he wasn't doing before? Are we going to have any insight to that? I'm really curious to see that. Are they going to focus at all on the Deshaun Watson period with this team? Obviously, they haven't started filming during that period of time, but is that going to be conversations of like, hey, we have this quarterback now that is playing a lot better than that quarterback was? Like, how much is that going to come up? I'm curious to see how vocal the players are going to be in that aspect. And just in general, like the energy of the players in the locker room. I think, that could go in a lot of directions and could be really telling for the current state of this team on, we only see so much from an outside perspective, but when you get a show like this, I think you will be able to tell a little bit more of what the energy and the mindset of this team right now is behind the scenes. And so I think that's an angle I'm really curious to see. I'm curious to see if like Jimmy Haslam is in this at all and what his level of interaction with the team on a day-to-day basis is, how much he's talking with Kevin and Andrew. So I think, I don't know if we'll be able to see that or how much of that we'll be able to see, but I would be curious to see if that's an angle that is in there. But yeah, I'm cautiously looking forward to it. Like, it could be terrible and a horrible look for the Browns and I won't want to see it, but, I don't know. I think it'll be really interesting to see how this team has been operating, these last few weeks and for the coming weeks of this season. Okay. So yeah, next up we've got Broncos game, Monday Night Football, competitive game in Denver. They are a 7-5 team led by Bo Nix, who's been playing really well this season. So should be interesting for the sake of everyone's job. I hope they continue to pull out performances like they had against the Steelers, except for maybe like the third quarter. We could probably ignore that. I believe that's when things started going bad, was the third quarter. So we'll just take out that little chunk, and hopefully we can continue to put together some good games, because it's going to be important for the sake of people's jobs, for evaluation of players in the future, and figuring out where this team needs to go. So, and I just don't like losing. I don't care what the record is. Like, I don't like losing, don't want to do it, would not like to continue. So we will see. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. So I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Take some time to relax, hopefully not work, be with family, eat a lot of good food, watch some Thanksgiving Day football. I was saying earlier, I feel like it's weird. I know the Dolphins have played on Thanksgiving before, but they don't give me Thanksgiving Day game energy whatsoever. They just don't. Like, you look at them and their uniforms and you're like, you're not supposed to play on Thanksgiving. This is like un-American for some reason in my mind. Like the Lions and the Packers and the Cowboys, like those teams should be playing on Thanksgiving. The Dolphins, absolutely not. Like, that feels incorrect to me. So let me know if you agree with that, because it's giving me weird energy. Okay, yeah, so that is all I have. Have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the weekend. We'll be back next week, hopefully talking about another Browns win, hopefully talking about a couple another Cavs wins strung together, and looking forward to it. If you could please subscribe on the YouTube, I'd very much appreciate it. Leave a comment on the YouTube, follow and subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. I appreciate you all so much for listening. Enjoy the holidays, and as always, go Browns.